Oh no!
Awesome.
Mind my business!
Fail.
Mind my business.
Oh yeah.
Mind my business. Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Mind My Business. It's our opinion podcast from Hype 1000. I'm Max, your host, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hype 1000. And we're a corporate audio startup, so we talk about everything in that corporate environment when it comes to audio and everything around it. So in this podcast, we share ideas, opinions, thoughts about stuff we see that we find interesting that is happening in the audio environment, in the audio industry. Yesterday, I talked about live captions and social audio in LinkedIn and what it means for corporates and what I think about is going to happen to social audio. So feel free and go back to our first episode and listen to it and share your thoughts on what do you think about this format. We're looking forward to it. And today I would love to talk about charts. The podcast charts is something that is for a lot of people really, really important, especially for the content creators. And I heard this podcast yesterday from OMR Media and Pod Talk, and the guys from Pod Talk. They are the managing directors of Podstars, which is a big podcast agency in Germany. And they were talking about the relevance of charts, the changes that are happening now, and what that means for the monetization aspect of it. And I heard it, and it was quite interesting. They talked about, how you can get into the charts, how you can build your community, how you can build your audience, and the algorithm behind it, especially on Spotify, which is, of course, the most relevant podcast platform, or has become the most relevant podcast platform in the past few years. And then I thought about, okay, if charts is so important, of course, why is that so? And it makes sense for podcasters in general to look at the charts, and they want to grow their audience, and they want to do that because they want to be more relevant. And the higher you rank in the charts, then more people will find you because it's a tool for discovery. And then with that, you grow your audience, and eventually your goal is to monetize that. And the bigger you are, the bigger checks you can cash in. So that makes sense because it really is very, very similar to what we've seen in the past in the Billboard Top 100, where the biggest names were on there. And I thought, yeah, it totally makes sense. And then I thought, well, a lot of musicians are really, really famous, got really, really big, and they've never been in the Billboard Top 100. And could that also be true for podcasters? And I thought, yes, it totally makes sense when you look at the corporate audio market, because what is happening for a lot of companies. They focus very much in their communication on B2C. And so they see audio as a new channel where you can reach, a younger demographic. It's hip and cool to do a podcast. So, of course, they will launch their own format. And oftentimes it's employer branding formats. It's some kind of like where they share their strategy and ideas, which doesn't make sense on the platform like Spotify, because it's kind of like a shareholder podcast, but who cares? And then there's some other experiments that are happening. But then I thought, okay, they do that, and they must think in the same kind of terms of, I want to be in the charts, because then a lot of people will find me and I will reach out to a new audience. And that never happens, because you will most likely, with a corporate format, not get into those numbers where you will be really big and have your own format ranking in the top 100 in whatever kind of environment. My personal opinion. I haven't seen it so far, but feel free to reach out and tell me if I'm wrong, or if you have an example of a company that has done that. So companies retreat to two things that they can do. And one thing could be they get a strong name, an influencer, and they put him in their own format, just like a social media channel takeover, for example. And they get him on there, and then build their audience, and they can say like, this was super successful. We reached this many people. Two things you don't know: how many people would have reached without that person, and most likely the answer is going to be a lot less. So how good was your format in the end, or was it the personality that brought you those people, and how much rubbed off on you, and how many people stay with you? And it comes to the second part, because you don't really know the people that were listening to you or that stay with your brand, because at the moment the podcast platforms aren't that good in providing data about specifically your audiences, and again, also building your audience, because what you want to do is build your CRM. You want to communicate and interact with those people because you want to get them to, in the end, buy your product or your service or whatever you have to offer. It makes sense that Spotify now cooperates with Shopify, which makes sense. Then you can have actual tracking, and most likely in the future, it will be possible to have more analytics, better analytics, and a CRM system attached to Spotify. And there's most likely some companies out there already working on that and offering you some solutions. That is the one thing that companies do, and it doesn't seem to be really successful so far, and it doesn't really help you build your brand reputation and win your clients. And the second thing you could do is you spend a lot of money on advertising on your regular channels, or especially, and it would make sense to do that in podcast advertising. And I would think, if you have to spend a lot of money advertising your content, then that content might not be that good. So what you should rather do, in my opinion, is take that money that you spend on creating that content that might just be like a B+ content, and spend that as well in advertising, and go to those big names, go to those household podcast names that match with your audience, because that makes sense, and then advertise the heck out of your product with those hosts, that then say like, then you do that influencer game that you would do on Instagram, as well as you do that on in podcasting. And again, a felt reality at the moment is that more companies are starting a corporate podcast rather than spending money in podcast advertising. And spending money in podcast advertising would make much more sense to bring, especially in Germany, where the market is rather small compared to the US market, English speaking, a bigger audience, everything, where you could elevate a lot, the whole market by spending money on it, because the more money is in the market, the more professionalized it gets, and you would help niche podcasts that really have the audience, because the smaller podcasts, they know your audience, they know their audience really well, they engage with them really strongly, and finding those people to advertise your product can really help you. And again, it's kind of like micro influencing on Instagram or TikTok. You could do the same thing in podcasting as well, and rather focus on that advertising aspect of it. But I want to cover another topic that I thought then, okay, and coming back to that music analogy, there is bands out there that have never been in the charts, but are super successful. So you need to find the right audiences as a company to not be in the charts, but still be really successful. And there's two audiences that you could fish into to really, help you grow your business. And that one group is everybody, your audience that in the B2B environment. It's your business partners, it's your B2B clients, because most likely they are very interested in what you have to say and building a personal relationship with you. And you could really move and advance in that field and be, on the frontier of doing something new compared to your competition. So that could be really interesting. And then you don't have to consider being on Spotify because you can use other tools, you can use other software, and you are not dependent on, the charts. And the second group that could be really interesting for you is your employees, your team. So B2E communication can be really helpful to build, again, that personal relationship, because audio is authentic, personal, and can be consumed really easily, and it's truly remote in that aspect. And that's what we've been preaching, or that it's what we're preaching all the time to our clients, that audio can help you, especially being very inclusive to people that have a reading disability, that have maybe disabilities and can't really see well. So you can be very inclusive in your communications, where people do not need a screen, or where a screen can be hindering. And that also then relates to your workforce, where you have your sales teams that are on the road working with clients and being and improving effectiveness and efficiency with that audience, because they don't have time to read your emails, they don't have time to watch your videos because they're driving from client A to client B, but they could spend that time in the car driving around, listening to relevant content from you, building a personal relationship, and also using that content to work with the clients, spend more time with the clients, and work better with them on new product launches or whatever you share using audio content, as well as expanding into all the non-desk workers, that people that are driving your bikes of your food delivery company, that are working in your logistics facilities or production facilities, the staff that is working in your retail locations. All those people don't have access to screens all the time. They are spending time commuting to their place of work, because most likely if you work in production or retail, you can't do that from home. So, spending that time, getting some of the information out there, and consuming some of that information while commuting to work, while being on your lunch break, while, filling up the shelves, having, your earbuds in and listening to some interesting stuff that you have to share, doing some training on, on client conversation. You can do all that without a screen. So audio is then again a really important tool. So let's wrap this up. So for the charts are important, but most likely the charts are not important for you as a corporate. And with that in mind, you should start considering moving or expanding your view from just being very focused on B2C, because that market is super competitive and it's hard to compete in a market where Spotify is spending a lot of money on their own formats, and where you have those big household names that already have a big audience, or starting a new podcast, bring in the audience, those influencers, those YouTubers coming into the podcasting space. So it's going to be super tough for you. But where you kind of have like open range, where you can have Blue Ocean is your own staff, and your B2B partners, and winning new partners. And maybe the aspect of those two we will discuss in different episodes later on, go a bit more into detail. But yeah, don't believe the hype, don't believe the charts, expand your horizon a little bit. That's my personal opinion for all you corporates out there considering audio to be something you want to do in the future. If you agree, reach out. If you don't agree, reach out. If you have a completely different view, reach out as well. You can do that on LinkedIn, via our email, mindmybusiness@hype1000.de, or all the other channels. We're looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to hearing you tomorrow in a new episode of Mind My Business.
Why don't you mind your business?